Now, on Voices of Reason, we're pleased to be joined by State Representative Jared Solomon. Solomon is the author of House Bill 979, which talks about the process to try to get independent voters involved in the primary process. Representative Solomon, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be with you, Steve. Thanks so much for having me.
Could you explain a little bit to our listeners about Bill 979 and some of the other bills that currently are residing in the General Assembly on this topic?
This bill is foundational and fundamental to our democracy. It brings more voices into the democratic process. We all know the common story in Pennsylvania elections, and this past primary was a great example. In my home county in Philadelphia, 19% of voters came out to vote in our primary. And in some divisions and in some precincts throughout Pennsylvania, turnout was as low as 10% or lower. Now, what do we say about that? We could attribute that to voter apathy. We could say that voters are just too busy. There might be a family illness. There are stresses and strains on people that prevent them at times from voting. But what we can say all throughout Pennsylvania definitively is that there is a problem. The status quo is not acceptable. So why not turn to the over 1.2 million voters in Pennsylvania, the fastest growing party in Pennsylvania, labeled independent or unaffiliated, where people are saying clearly, we don't want to affiliate with either of the parties, but we deserve a voice, a vote in our primary system. I want to bring them into the process, allow their votes and their voices to flourish in our system in Pennsylvania.
Did I read correctly that I guess in 2000 there were approximately 200,000 young voters, Asian Americans, Latinos, and veterans that classified themselves as independent? That number has grown over the past 2 decades to 600,000. So, to your point about the 1.3 million that currently are excluded, that number is just going to increasingly grow, isn't it?
Exactly. So if you look at the fastest growing group within the 1.2 million voters in Pennsylvania, that group consists of our young people. So imagine you're young people, or as you mentioned, the vast majority of veterans in Pennsylvania, not the vast majority, but many veterans, decide to register as unaffiliated or independent. So imagine you're a veteran, you've served your country downrange, you get honorably discharged, and then you want to participate in our democracy. We here in Pennsylvania say, no, we value your service, but not enough that you can actually vote in our primary system. Same with young people. You graduate college. You now want to vote. You want to get involved in the civic fabric of our Commonwealth. Once again, rather than rolling out the red carpet, we do the opposite. We say, not here in Pennsylvania. We're closed off to new voices, new ways of doing and thinking in PA. Let's do the opposite. Let's roll out that red carpet to our veterans and our young people and say, we want you to be part of the civic fabric of our Commonwealth. Let's get you involved, engaged in the primary, so that you then not only vote in the general, but become citizens that work through our system, that petition government, that try and shape minds and move Pennsylvania in a different new direction.
Now, this is the type of thing where if I'm an independent voter, I would walk into my polling place and say, I would like to vote in the Democratic primary or the Republican primary. It's not a case of being able to pick and choose, correct?
That's exactly right. So if you are a Democratic voter or Republican voter, You still will continue to vote in your primary. But if you are an unaffiliated voter, and again, we're talking about over 1.2 million voters in Pennsylvania, you now can come in to your local precinct and you still are protecting the integrity of that decision. So you're still saying, I'm independent. I'm not affiliating with either party. But today, in this election, the Democrats or the Republicans have won me over, and I'm going to vote on their ticket. Once you exit, you've still maintained your independent status. This gives an amazing opportunity to both parties to compete in that primary election to get Democrats and Republicans to exercise muscles they typically don't exercise, which is reaching out to new voters in primaries and then selling them on their ideas, their vision for a better thriving Commonwealth. That's really exciting and an idea we should embrace here in Pennsylvania.
Now, the bill was introduced in 2023 and it was immediately laid on the table, and it was reintroduced to the state government committee in April. What seems to be the issue with being able to bring it before the floor of the House?
Power. And I understand it. Parties here in Pennsylvania in a closed primary system have the power to draw the lines in districts throughout the Commonwealth and control who votes. This is another reform we need, which is a citizen-led commission to redraw our lines. But the reason I bring that up is because when I talked at the beginning about the percentage of voters that determine our election, 19%, 25%, basically your primary elections are your general elections. So now the vast majority of state reps and state senators win their primary. They won by only appealing to their rank base voters. They are now representing a general electorate who will never get to have a say in whether they should be their representative because that was already decided in their primary. Now, for the special interests that control this process, that's beneficial. You get to determine your voters. You get to maintain a lower voter turnout, a predictable turnout. When you add new voters in, that can be a threat to the vested power base in our state. But rather than seeing it that way, the power brokers, special interests in our state should see it a new way, see it in a way that it will not only empower voters, but empower parties to reach out and broaden their vision to appeal to new folks throughout Pennsylvania.
The biggest question that I hear from friends, neighbors, other folks is, if I am a member of the Republican Party, I should be able to choose my candidate. Why should I allow someone who has opted out from being a member of my political affiliation from having a say in who our party puts forward?
Right. I hear this all the time. And the analogy I get here in Pennsylvania is just pick one. You're either an Eagles fan or a Steelers fan. Just pick one team. Now, what I've learned about you, Steve, is you're a Bills fan. Now, that's the wrong decision, but that's okay. I want to make you the best Bills fan possible. Now, maybe this year you decide because the Eagles go to the Super Bowl and win that, you know what, I'm tired of rooting for the Bills. I'm gonna come aboard. I'm gonna come aboard and become an Eagles fan. Maybe not. It's my job as an Eagles fan to persuade you, Steve, but it's not my job to tell you that you can't root for the Bills ever. And there are only two teams that matter. It's not our job in the sports arena. It's certainly not our job as elected leaders to dictate to people the left and right limits of political engagement.
I'll close on this note. I still am a Phillies fan, though, on that. So for now that everyone knows I'm a Bills fan. Representative Jared Solomon, thanks so much for joining us today on Voices of Reason.
Steve, thanks so much for having me. Really a pleasure.